Ghost, before the title, Please Come, Holy Spirit. Ever wonder why? Chapter 10, Part 1, Connecting the Dots of Jesuit Influence. In Chapter 9, Part 2, we discussed a bit of the Church, the Rothschilds, and the Jesuits' histories and timelines. I also said, I am not saying that the Jesuits started the quest for global domination, but they have certainly hijacked it and taken control of it. And we have now come to a time where we seem to be in the semi-final stage of the Mark of the Beast, and the Jesuits seem to be in the driver's seat. Now it is time to connect the dots of Jesuit influence in the modern world. A quick reminder of just who the Jesuits are. The Jesuits were founded in 1540 in Montmartre, Paris, France. And who can forget this? Fidel Castro, Stalin, and Hitler were all under the Jesuit influence. Lots of other popes and world leaders throughout history have been under the Jesuit control, pretty much since the Jesuits' inception. A lot of people do not know Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is a Jesuit. They also don't know that he is not the first Jesuit Prime Minister of Canada. He is the second one. His father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who served as the 15th Prime Minister of Canada from April 20th, 1968 to June 4th, 1979, was the first. So now we have a Jesuit Pope, a Jesuit Prime Minister, a Jesuit Vice President, and a Jesuit Black Pope. Who's next? Mike Pence, that's who. Mike Pence, another admitted Jesuit, became Vice President of the United States when Donald Trump won the U.S. 2016 presidential election. The Jesuits' influence also penetrates the Palestinian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Red Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, and a host of other African, Australian, North, South, and Central American world leaders as well. In other words, the Black Pope's political infrastructure spans every continent, and his power is worldwide. Don't kid yourselves, people. The suffering of many is in but the hands of a few. They might want to believe they own the world, but they don't. God does. They might have the weapons, but we have the numbers, and that terrifies them. Here's a fact most people don't know. The Jesuits control Lockheed Martin, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, and Northrop Grumman. It's very scary to see just how far the Jesuits have come since the 1540s, and it's even scarier to think of how far they are willing to go to achieve their goal of global domination and human enslavement. Since their inception to the present day, the Jesuits, through the Black Pope, control the Vatican, the White Pope, and the Church, which represents spirituality. The Jesuits also control the City of London, the Rothschilds, and the Rothschilds Bank of England, which represents the money and banking systems throughout the world. And the Jesuits also control Washington, D.C., the President of the United States, and that represents their military arm. Each one of these three entities are the three main branches of the tree of organizations, corporations controlled by the Jesuits. The union of these three branches is really an unholy trinity. According to the media, politicians, world leaders, bankers, and the power elite, etc., etc., there are over 190 countries in the world today. In reality, there are only three countries, corporations, conveniently hidden in plain sight within the 190-plus countries, which actually control the world today. Those three countries, corporations, are also known as city-states, and in reality, they are just corporations masquerading as countries, or countries masquerading as corporations, whichever you prefer. The following are a few excerpts from http://beforeitisnews.com. Article title, The Three City-States That Control the Whole World. The three city-states that control the world today and the roles they play are: Number 1. The Vatican, also known as Vatican City, controls religion. The Pope wants to merge all the religions into one, which is absolute nonsense. The Pope broke off from the truth, confusingly referred to as the Eastern Church, or Eastern Orthodox Church, or Orthodox Church, or Orthodox, about 1,000 years ago. Number 2, the City of London, not to be confused with the capital London, controls finance. The City of London receives taxes from their subject slaves in Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and every other Commonwealth country there is. They design and control our financial and banking systems. Number 3, Washington, D.C. controls the military. Death camps and stacks of black plastic coffins that can hold up to 6 to 10 bodies each are piled high in a long train-like fashion as far as the eye can see in the United States today. These 3 countries are sovereign corporate entities that are not part of the countries they are located in. They have their own laws, their own identities, and their own flags. The flag in Washington, D.C. has 3 red stars, each symbolizing a city-state within the 3-city empire. The 3-city empire consists of Vatican City, the City of London, and Washington, D.C. The Vatican offers spiritual guidance to more than 2 billion people. The City of London is the corporate center of the 3 city-states and controls the world economically. The city-state of Washington, D.C. is in charge of the military. The Constitution of Washington, D.C. operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which in no way resembles the United States Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the Constitution. If you take a moment to study some signed treaties and charters between the United States and Britain, you will find that the United States has always been a British crowned colony. In 1606, King James, yes, the same King James who revised the Bible, signed the Charter of Virginia. The charter granted America's British forefathers a license to colonize America. The charter also guaranteed future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all citizens in colonized lands in America. Why do you think Virginia has always been called the Commonwealth of Virginia since 1606 to the present day? Because Virginia, like the rest of America, has always been a British crowned colony. In 1783, the Paris Peace Treaty was signed. This treaty identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States, contradicting the belief that America won the War of Independence. And although King George III of England gave up most claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payments for his business ventures of colonizing America. If America really won the War of Independence, why would America agree to pay the King of England reparations? When the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was passed, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment, the title of nobility amendment, forbids U.S. officials from using royal titles like king or prince. For some strange reason, though, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears in the current copies of the U.S. Constitution. The War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into debt slaves of the king. In 1812, the British torched and burned the White House and all U.S. government buildings to the ground, destroying many ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. Then, nearly a century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act of 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of the American economy to the Federal Reserve Bank. Most Americans still believe the Fed is owned by the government, but it is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose Class A majority shareholders include the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, and the Lehman Brothers. Source, http://beforeitsnews.com. Article title, 3 city-states that control the whole world. Sorry, truth deniers, this one is gonna hurt. You might want to bury your head back in the sand for this. YouTuber Sovereign Living reveals an earth-shattering truth that many Americans are completely unaware of, which is that the United States is actually a crown colony corporation, as are all nations that join the United Nations. Furthermore, the Crown is a British corporation that is owned and operated by the Vatican, pursuant to the Treaty of 1213. It's hard to say exactly who is running the United States, but one thing that can be said for sure is that it's not the people we elect and send to Washington. Furthermore, whoever it is does not have Americans' best interest in mind. Source http://beforeitsnews.com. Article title, Proof U.S. Congressional Record Says U.S. is actually a crown colony. Who are the Empire of the Three City-States? How did they get started? And what do they have to do with our souls? First and foremost is, the most important thing to know and remember, is that the Empire of the Three City-States are all owned and controlled by the Jesuits. Although the Jesuits don't like to be identified as rulers of the Empire of the Three City-States, and they like to stay out of the limelight, it is the Jesuits who, through the Black Pope, pulls the strings of all the elitist front-person puppets of the Empire of the Three City-States. Then, the front-person puppets of the Empire of the Three City-States pull the strings of their own elitist front-person puppets placed in high positions throughout the world to advance the unfolding Jesuit New World Order agenda. Remember what Francesco Borgia, Third Jesuit Superior General, Black Pope said, "We came in like lambs, and we will rule like wolves. We shall be expelled like dogs, and return like eagles." The Society of Jesus, more commonly referred to as the Jesuits, are the armed militia of the Roman Catholic Church. The Vatican is already the spiritual center for over 2 billion human souls, and if the black and white popes get their way, they will unite all religions under one roof. Should this ever happen, and I believe it eventually will, then this will put every human soul in mortal peril. For the Vatican, through its spiritual influence over all these human souls, will corrupt, or attempt to corrupt, all of our souls. Remember, Jesus Christ told us in his own words, Satan controlled all those in high places. He exposed the synagogue of Satan in Revelation 2:9. I know thy tribulation and thy poverty, but thou art rich, and thou art blasphemed by them that say that they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Revelation 2:9. And Jesus gave us many other warnings. Warnings like, when therefore you shall see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place. He that reads, let him understand. Matthew 24:15. And warnings like, for there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch as to deceive even the elect, if it were possible. Matthew 24:24. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am he, and they shall deceive many. Mark 13:6. Therein lies the danger to our souls. Through the spiritual influence of the church, many will be deceived into worshiping the Antichrist. Remember, it is under the guise of good that evil is done. The following are a few excerpts from http://www.bibliothecappleiades.net. The Trinity of the Global Empire. Why is Washington, D.C. not a state and a legally separate state entity apart from the United States of America? Why is the 1 square mile of the City of London, which has all the banks with its own mayor, a separate city-state entity from all other England? Why does the Vatican have its own country code, where the entire city-state entity is guarded by Swiss guards and shares no laws with Italy? Where Switzerland has never been involved in wars, where banksters go for secret accounts to hide their wealth. The aforementioned city-states listed above are foreign corporate entities, not connected to the nations they appear to be a part of. In other words, the City of London, that is, the 1 square mile within Greater London, is not technically part of Greater London or England, just as Vatican City is not a part of Rome or Italy. Likewise, Washington, D.C. is not part of the United States that it controls. These sovereign corporate entities have their own laws, their own identities, and also have their own flags. So how are these 3 city-states ultimately connected? To find this out, we must first go back to the Knights Templar and their initial 200-year reign of power. The Knights Templar were first called the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ in the Temple of Solomon. This is a blatantly misleading title, considering the immense wealth and power the Templars who operated 9,000 manors across Europe and owned all the mills and markets. It was the Templars that issued the first paper money for public use in Europe, establishing the fiat banking system we know today. In England, the Templars established their headquarters at a London temple, which still exists today, and is called Temple Bar. This is located in the city of London between Fleet Street and Victoria Embankment. The aforementioned Crown, to be exact, is the Knights Templar Church, also known as the Crown Temple. It is the Crown Temple that controls the legal court systems of the U.S., Canada, and many other countries. All bar associations are directly linked to the International Bar Association and the Inns of Court at the Crown Temple in the City of London. For your information, several centuries ago, the Inns of Court were any of a sizable number of buildings or precincts where barristers traditionally lodged, trained, and carried on their profession. Over the centuries, the number of active Inns of Court was reduced to the present four: the Honorable Society of Lincoln's Inn, the Honorable Society of the Inner Temple, the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple, and the Honorable Society of Gray's Inn. Source: http://www.been-there-done-that.org.uk. This is the Inns of Court coat of arms. Anytime you hear somebody refer to the Bar Association, they are talking about a British Masonic system that has nothing to do with the country's sovereignty or the constitutional rights of its people. This is why when you go to court in the U.S., you see a U.S. flag with a gold fringe, denoting international rule. The government of the United States, Canada, Britain are all subsidiaries of the Crown, as is the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States. The ruling monarch in England is also subordinate to the Crown. The global financial and legal system is controlled from the City of London by the Crown. The 1 square mile making up the center of Greater London is the global seat of power, at least at the visible level. Washington, D.C. was established as a city-state in 1871 with the passage of the Act of 1871, which officially established the United States as a corporation under the rule of Washington, which itself is subservient to the City of London. Corporations are run by presidents, which is why they call the person perceived to hold the highest seat of power in the land the president. The fact is, the president is nothing more than a figurehead for the central bankers and transnational corporations, both of which themselves are controlled by high ecclesiastic Freemasonry that really control this country and ultimately call the shots. Washington, D.C. operates under a system of Roman law and outside the limitations established by the U.S. Constitution. Therefore, it should not be surprised that the name Capitol Hill derives from Capitoline Hill, which was the seat of government for the Roman Empire. If you look at the wall behind the podium in the House of Representatives, you will notice that on either side of the U.S. flag is the depiction of bundles of sticks tied together with an axe. These are called fasci, hence the root of the word fascism. This was the symbol of fascism in the Roman Empire, as it was under the Nazis and still is today. It is not a coincidence that these symbols are featured on the floor of Congress. Most U.S. citizens believe the United States is a country, and the president is its leader. But the United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the president is not the president or the leader. He is the president of the corporation of the U.S. The president, along with his elected officials, work for the corporation, not for the American people. So who owns the giant U.S. corporation? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen, and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another crowned colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of the three city-states. Thus, the United States is controlled by the three city-states. John F. Kennedy said, "Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. No war ever posed a greater threat to our security." And Daniel K. Inouye, U.S. Senator from Hawaii, said, "There exists a shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself." Testimony at the Iran-Contra hearings, 1986. These three city-states belong to no nation and pay no taxes. They have their own separate laws, their own police, their own mayors, their own post offices, and their own separate flags and their own separate identities. The religious control is run by the Vatican, population approximately 1,000 people. The Vatican has its own newspaper, its own postal service, its own library, its own army of Swiss guards, and its own prison. The Vatican rules over 2 billion people. the Vatican's wealth is held by the Rothschild Bank of England and the Federal Reserve Bank, which is a private corporation. The banking control? The City of London, also known as the Crown. Population? Approximately 11,000 people. The Crown is not owned by the Westminster and the Queen or England. The City of London has been granted various special privileges since the Norman Conquest, such as the right to run its own affairs, partly due to the power of its financial capital. These are also mentioned by the Statute of William and Mary in 1690. The city-state of London is the world's financial power center and the wealthiest square mile on earth. It has its own courts, laws, flag, and police force. Not a part of Greater London and not even a part of England or the British Commonwealth, and pays 0 taxes. The city-state of London houses Fleet Street's newspaper and publishing monopolies, BBC, Reuters, also the headquarters for the worldwide English Freemasonry and for the worldwide money cartel known as the Crown. For centuries, the Bank of England has been the center of the world's fraudulent money system, with its debt-based fiat currency. The Rothschild banking cartel has maintained tight-fisted control of the global money system through the Bank for International Settlements, BIS, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank. The central banks of each nation, the Federal Reserve in their American colony, and the satellite banks in the Caribbean, the Rothschild banking cartel determine with the stroke of a pen the value of all currency on earth. It is their control of the money supply which allows them to control the world affairs. From financing both sides of every war through interlocking directorates and weapons manufacturing companies, to executing global depopulation schemes, crusades, genocide, control of the food supply, medicine, and all basic human necessities. The Rothschilds have groomed their inaudibility through control of the so-called free press, and they wall themselves off with accusations of anti-Semitism whenever the spotlight is shone upon them. The Crown is not the royal family or British monarch. Behind the scenes, on the invisible level, the Crown is a British corporation that is owned and operated by the Vatican, pursuant to the Treaty of 1213. The Black Pope and a committee of 12 men rule the Jewish Vatican. In reality, they are the Crown. Notice how there are 13 members. However, in front of the scenes, on the visible level, the Crown is the private corporate city-state of London. Its council of 12 members, board of directors, rule the corporations under a mayor, called the Lord Mayor, with legal representation provided by S.J. Berwin. Again, notice how there are 13 members. The number 13 seems to be a very important number for these NWO Illuminati types. Like I said in Chapter 8, Part 1, the use of the number 13 goes all the way back to biblical times. It is referred to throughout the Bible, from Genesis in the beginning, all the way through to Revelation in the end. On the visible level, the City of London and its rulers are referred to as the Crown, and are not subject to the Parliament. They are a sovereign state within a state. The City of London is the financial hub of the world. It is here that the Rothschilds have their base of operations and their centrality of control. The Central Bank of England, controlled by the Rothschilds, is located in the city. All major British banks have their main offices in the city. 385 foreign banks are located in the city. 70 banks from the United States are located in the city. The London Stock Exchange is located in the city. Lloyd's of London is located in the city. The Baltic Exchange, shipping contracts, is located in the city. Fleet Street, newspapers and publishing, is located in the city. The London Metal Exchange is located in the city. The London Commodity Exchange, trading rubber, wool, sugar, coffee, etc., is located in the city. Every year, a Lord Mayor is elected as monarch of the city. The British Parliament does not make a move without consulting the Lord Mayor of the city. For here in the heart of London are grouped together Britain's financial institutions, dominated by the Rothschild-controlled Central Bank of England. The Rothschilds have traditionally chosen the Lord Mayor since 1820. Who is the present-day Lord Mayor of the city? Only the Rothschilds know for sure. How the City of London came into power inside England. Enter the Rothschilds. Mayor Amschel Bauer opened a money-lending business on Judenstrasse, Jew Street, in Frankfurt, Germany in 1750, and changed his name to Rothschild. Mayor Rothschild had 5 sons. The smartest of his sons, Nathan, was sent to London to establish a bank in 1806. Much of the initial funding for the new bank was tapped from the British East India Company, which Mayer Rothschild had significant control of. Mayer Rothschild placed his other four sons in Frankfurt, Paris, Naples, and Vienna. In 1814, Nathan Rothschild saw an opportunity in the Battle of Waterloo. Early in the battle, Napoleon appeared to be winning, and the first military report to London communicated that fact. But the tide turned in favor of Wellington. A courier of Nathan Rothschild brought the news to him in London on June 20th. This was 24 hours before Wellington's courier arrived in London with news of Wellington's victory. Seeing this fortuitous event, Nathan Rothschild began spreading rumors that Britain was defeated. With everyone believing that Wellington was defeated, Nathan Rothschild began to sell all of his stock on the English stock market. Everyone panicked and also began selling, causing stocks to plummet to practically nothing. At the last minute, Nathan Rothschild began buying up the stocks at rock-bottom prices. This gave the Rothschild family complete control of the British economy, now the financial center of the world. And it also forced England to set up a revamped Bank of England with Nathan Rothschild in control. The ruling committee of 300 for the crown names, included in the London-based corporation, are names like Rockefeller, Gore, Greenspan, Kissinger, Krugman of the New York Times, Powell, Gates, Buffett, Bush, etc. Why are these Americans on a foreign committee? Because the Crown still owns the United States Corporation, a private corporation. The Lord Mayor and 12-member council serve as proxies, representatives, who sit in for 13 of the world's wealthiest, most powerful banking families, headed by the Rothschild dynasty. They include the Warburgs, the Oppenheimers, the Schiffs. These families and their descendants run the Crown Corporation of London. The Rockefeller Syndicate runs the American colony through interlocking directorships in J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Brown Brothers Harriman, and Brown Brothers Harriman, New York, along with their oil oligarchy, ExxonMobil, formerly the multi-headed colossus Standard Oil. They also manage the Rothschild oil asset British Petroleum, BP. The Crown Corporation holds title to worldwide Crown land in Crown colonies like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, many Caribbean islands, and every other Commonwealth country there is. The British Parliament and the British Prime Minister serve as a public front for the hidden power of these ruling Crown families. Washington, D.C. Senator William Jenner, in his 1954 speech, said, "Today, the path to total dictatorship in the U.S. can be laid by strictly legal means. We have a well-organized political action group in this country, determined to destroy our Constitution and establish a one-party state. It operates secretly, silently, continuously, to transform our government. This ruthless power-seeking elite is a disease of our century. This group is answerable neither to the President, the Congress, nor the courts. It is practically irremovable." William Jenner, 1954. Remember, Washington, D.C. operates under tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. The Treasonous Act of 1871 allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States, and outside the interests of America's people, or sheeple if you prefer. The President of the United States is the chief executive of the Corporation of the United States, operating like any other CEO. The President governs with a board of directors, known as cabinet officials, and managers, known as senators and Congress. Obama, as others before him, is President of the United States, operating as vassal king, taking orders from the City of London through the RIIA, the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Read the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871. The United States of America is a crown colony. Careful study of signed treaties and charters between Britain and the U.S. expose a well-kept secret. The United States has always been and remains a British crown colony. Even though this fact is clearly stated in the Congressional Record of the United States, I know this fact is hard for a lot of people to believe. That's why I'm citing several different sources exposing the same fact. Hopefully this will prove no assertion of bias for the skeptics. King James I, not just famous for translating the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the first Charter of Virginia in 1606, which granted America's British forefathers license to settle and colonize America. It also guaranteed future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all citizens in colonized land in America, stolen from Native Americans via genocidal methods. America's farming industry and infrastructure was developed by Africans, stolen from their homeland, classified as property, and relegated to subhuman status. After America declared independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. The treaty identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States, completely contradicting any premise that America won the War of Independence. Although King George gave up most of his claims over American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America, turning its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the King. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings, destroying ratification records to the United States Constitution. Most U.S. citizens have been fooled into thinking the United States is a country, and the President of the United States is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, a colony, and the President of the United States is the President of the Corporation of the United States. The President of the United States, along with his officers, his cabinet officials, and elected officials, the Congress, work for the corporation, not for the American people, sheeple, masses, goyim, useless eaters, etc. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the Corporation of the United States? Like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and every other Commonwealth country, whose leaders are Prime Ministers of the Queen and whose land is called Crown Land. The United States is just another Crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the Empire of the Three City-States. From Wikipedia. The centers of all three branches of the federal government of the United States are located within the District of Columbia, including the Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. Washington is the home to many national monuments and museums, which are primarily situated on or around the National Mall. The city hosts 176 foreign embassies, as well as the headquarters of many international organizations, trade unions, non-profit organizations, lobbying groups, and professional associations. A locally elected mayor and 13-member council have governed the district since 1973. However, the Congress maintains supreme authority over the city and may overturn local laws. The district has a non-voting at-large congressional delegate, but no senators. The 23rd Amendment to the United States Constitution, ratified in 1961, grants the district 3 electoral votes in presidential elections. Congress passed the Organic Act of 1871, which repealed the individual charters of the city of Washington and Georgetown and created a new territorial government for the whole District of Columbia. President Grant appointed Alexander Roby Shepherd to the position of governor in 1873. Shepherd authorized large-scale projects that greatly modernized Washington, but ultimately bankrupted the district government. In 1874, Congress replaced the territorial government with an appointed 3-member board of commissioners. Another means of control is through the world's central banks. Contrary to popular belief, the Federal Reserve is not a part of the U.S. government. The only part that is federal about the Federal Reserve is its name. It is a privately owned enterprise, and so is the Bank of England, and every other central bank that there is out there, including the World Bank. Interestingly enough, though, all of these private central banks are owned by largely the same group of people. This group includes, but is not limited to, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, and their interests. Essentially what they have is a monopoly on money. All money that is out there is a loan. The central banks print the money and then loans it to the government with interest. This is why the national debt of any country grows exponentially, because the money that is needed to pay back the loan comes from the central bank as a loan, again carrying interest. This is the reason why the national debt of any country can never be paid off, which ensures the masses of every country remain debt slaves to the Rothschild banking cartels. The American national debt is so great right now that every person born into the U.S. is automatically over $70,000 in debt. This way of control is to make every citizen of the colony a willing debt slave of the empire. I foresee that the manufactured economic crisis of right now in the United States will be used as grounds to push for a North American Union and the use of a single North American currency to enslave an entire continent. The new currency will be called the Amero. In an interview with Jim Lira that was aired on PBS NewsHour on September 18, 2007, the former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan essentially said that the Federal Reserve was above the law and that no agency of government can overrule their actions. Jim Lira, what is the proper relationship? What should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States? Alan Greenspan, well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means, basically, that there is no other agency of government which can overrule the actions that we take. So long as that is in place, and there is no evidence that the administration, or the Congress, or anybody else is requesting that we do things other than what we think is the appropriate thing, then what the relations are, frankly, don't matter. The fact that the Fed is above the law was demonstrated by Chairman Ben Bernanke during his appearance before Congress on March 4, 2009. Senator Bernie Sanders asked Bernanke about the $2.2 trillion in American tax dollars that was lent out by the Federal Reserve. Bernanke refused to provide an answer. Senator Sanders, will you tell the American people to whom you lent $2.2 trillion of their dollars to? Can you tell us who they are? Bernanke, no. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover said, the American mind simply has not come to a realization of the evil which has been introduced into our midst. It rejects even the assumption that human creatures could espouse a philosophy which must ultimately destroy all that is good and decent. J. Edgar Hoover. Just like the IRS. In the U.S., we pay taxes to a privately owned foreign corporation in the city of London. When we make a check out for a tax payment in California, we make it out to the Franchise Tax Board, a subsidiary of the USA Corporation, a private corporation. In the United States of America, the Federal Reserve Bank is owned by 8 families. Most live in Europe, and they pay no taxes on the trillions of interest they generate from the national debt of the United States, which enslaves the people of the United States. The IRS is a collection arm of the Federal Reserve Bank. The IRS is not an agency of the U.S. government. The Federal Reserve is not federal, nor does it have any reserves. Its main asset is the bonds received from the U.S. government, which gives the U.S. government the power to spend money created from the monetization of the credit of each American used as collateral and then brought into circulation. During the Depression of the 1930s, the same Wall Street bankers received bailouts, just as has happened recently. When will the people of America wake up? The Independent Treasury Act of 1921 suspended the de jure meeting by right of legal establishment Treasury Department of the United States government. Congress turned the Treasury Department over to a private corporation, the Federal Reserve and their agents. The bulk ownership of the Federal Reserve System, a very well-kept secret from the American citizen, is held by these banking interests. Warburg Bank of Hamburg, Warburg Bank of Amsterdam, Lazard Brothers of Paris, Israel Mosif Seif Banks of Italy, Chase Manhattan Bank of New York, Goldman Sachs of New York, Lehman Brothers of New York, Kuhn Loeb Bank of New York, and the big daddy of them all, the Rothschild Bank of England and the Rothschild Bank of Berlin. Source, http://www.bibliothecapplegades.net. Article title, Owners of the Empire. The Warburgs, Kuhn Loebs, Goldman Sachs, Schiffs, and Rothschilds have all intermarried into one big happy banking family. The Warburg family, which controls Deutsche Bank and BNP, tied up with the Rothschilds in 1814. Source, http://www.bibliothecapplegades.net. Article title, The Federal Reserve Cartel. Speaking of the Rothschilds, ever since learning of the Rothschilds and their goals, I have always believed that the Rothschilds are Jesuits. Otherwise, why would Mayor Amschel Rothschild choose a Jesuit named Adam Weishaupt to finalize and implement his plans for the Illuminati and total world domination? Apparently, I am not the only one who believes this. According to geopolitics.co, the Rothschilds are Jesuits. The Jewish Encyclopedia, Volume 2, page 497, admits that it is somewhat a curious sequel to the attempt to set up a Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds that at the present time, 1905, the latter are the guardians of the papal treasure. If this latter statement is true, the Rothschilds control, in addition to their own fortune, the immense liquid resources of the Catholic Church, which is second only to the Rothschilds in wealth and power. Source: The Two Babylons, Part 7, www.biblebelievers.org.au. Original source for Guardians of the Papal Treasure: Jewish Encyclopedia, published 1901 to 1906, page 497. www.jewishencyclopedia.com. End of Chapter 10, Part 1, All Honor and Glory to God. Coming next, Chapter 10, Part 2, The Rothschilds are Jesuits. Until then, remember, the devil is stalking you, and God is calling you. The Ghost before the title. Please come, Holy Spirit. Ever wonder why? Chapter 10, Part 2. The Rothschilds are Jesuits. Near the end of Chapter 10, Part 1, I said, I have always believed the Rothschilds are Jesuits, and apparently I am not the only one who believes this. According to geopolitics.co, the Rothschilds are Jesuits. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, Volume 2, page 497, the Rothschilds are the guardians of the papal treasure. And according to the Two Babylons, Part 7, www.biblebelievers.org.au, the Rothschilds control the immense wealth of the Catholic Church. So, if the Rothschilds are supposedly Jews, why do they have all this power and history within the Catholic Church? Could it be because of what I have always believed? I have always believed that the Rothschilds are in fact Jesuits, with a global domination agenda. Think about it. What better way is there to unite people after some man-made cataclysmic apocalypse than through religion? We all know we have souls, or at the very least, some form of spiritual aspect to our lives. So by using religion and or spirituality to unite people, the Jesuits, through the Church, can falsely direct the masses to worship the Antichrist. Beware of false prophets who come to you in the clothing of sheep, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Matthew 7:15. Behold, I send you as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents, and simple as doves. Matthew 10:16. Don't forget what Pope Paul VI admitted to the world in 1972. He said, the smoke of Satan has entered the Church of God. The following are excerpts from http://www.godlikeproductions.com. If you are not an American, you will understand why your country too is on its present course, as it too is controlled by the Jesuit General Black Pope through his select Jesuits, Knights of Malta, Shriner Freemasons, the Knights of Columbus, and the Illuminati's Masonic Kabbalistic Labor Zionist, Sabbatian Frankist, named after the Black Pope's baptized Jacob Frank, Jewish House of Rothschild. Check out the similarities between Jacob Frank and Jacob Rothschild. They almost look like they could be twins. Jacob Frank has been called the father of terrorism in his day, and Jacob Rothschild has been called the father of terrorism in our modern day. Do you think there could be a connection here? For the order controlled the infamous House of Rothschild since no later than the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, after which Jesuit-led crusade, the Rothschild family was surnamed. Source: Guardians of the Vatican Treasury, Eric John Phelps. Vatican Assassins, 3rd edition, page 90. The real power structure. The Treaty of Paris of 1763 designated King George III Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. And according to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the Rothschilds bear the title Guardians of the Vatican Treasury. The Vatican Treasury, of course, holds the imperial wealth of Rome. Imperial wealth grows in proportion to its victories in war. As the Jesuit empowerment, Regemini Militantis Ecclesiae, implies, the church at war is more necessary than the church at peace. According to H. Russell Robinson's Illustrated Armor of Imperial Rome, Caesarian soldiers protected themselves in battle with shields painted red. Since the soldiery is the state's most valuable resource, the Council of Trent admitted this in preferring the Jesuits to all other religious orders. It is easy to understand why the red shield was identified with the very life of the church, hence the appropriateness of the name Rothschild, German for red shield. The appointment of Rothschild gave the Black Papacy absolute financial privacy and secrecy. Who would ever search a family of Orthodox Jews for the key to the wealth of the Roman Catholic Church? I believe this appointment explains why the House of Rothschild is famous for helping nations go to war. It is fascinating that as Mayer Rothschild's sons grew into the family business, the firm took on the title of Mayer Amschel Rothschild und Sohn, which gives us the Notarican Mars. Isn't Mars the Roman god of war, whose heavenly manifestation is the red planet? There is a powerful Kabbalah here, and there's hardly an acre of inhabitable earth that hasn't been affected by it in some way. Tupper Saucy, Rulers of Evil, page 160 and 161. International finance and banking are not primarily Jewish. Many of the most powerful banking interests in the world are run by Gentiles. One of the most powerful forces in international banking is the Knights of Malta, a Roman Catholic military order controlled by the Jesuit Superior General Black Pope. Sadly, even a segment of the alternative media helps us to propagate the lie that the Jews run international banking. Interestingly, one of the titles of the Rothschild banking dynasty is Guardians of the Vatican Treasury. The Jews as a people have been used for centuries as a scapegoat by these international banksters and their secret societies, such as the Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta. To label the Jews as running banking, Hollywood, and other entities is to throw out the proverbial red herring, designed to throw us off the scent of the real controllers. Daryl Eberhardt, editor of Tackling the Tough Topics, January 28, 2006. Source, http://www.godlikeproductions.com. The Jesuit General Black Pope has been the most powerful man in the world since Pius VII restored the order of the Jesuits in 1814. Because of the suppression of the Jesuits by Pope Clement XIV in 1773, the Jesuits began the Bavarian Illuminati with one of their soldiers, Adam Weishaupt. The Illuminati absorbed the Jewish house of Rothschild, creating a colossus of wealth around the world, subject to the Jesuit General Black Pope. With this financial arm in place, the Jesuits then made war on the Vatican, including the Pope, the Roman Catholic monarchs of Europe, and the Order of the Dominicans. This Inquisition and crusade was called the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars. For 25 years, the Jesuit generals, Masonic agents, particularly in the person of Napoleon Bonaparte, conducted war. Bonaparte also punished the Knights of Malta, driving them from their island home to Russia. Eric John Phelps, Vatican Assassins, 2nd edition, page 582. The Jesuits, now formally suppressed by the Pope, were allied with Frederick the Great of Prussia and Catherine II of Russia. The Jesuit general was in control of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry and now sought an alliance with the Masonic Baron of the House of Rothschild. To accomplish this, he chose a Jesuit who was a German Gentile, not a Jew, by race and a Freemason by association, Adam Weishaupt. Eric John Phelps, Vatican Assassins, 3rd edition, page 401. The Rothschilds were Jesuits who used their Jewish background as a faux to cover their sinister activities. The Jesuits, working through Rothschild financier Nicholas Biddle, sought to gain control of the banking system of the United States. The Jesuits used Biddle and Rothschild to gain the upper hand in American banking, because they knew they could then control the people and effectively rewrite the Constitution according to papal law. Jackson was trying to stop them. We have already seen that the Rothschilds were the banking agents for the papacy's church. These three financial families, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, and the Rockefellers, all do the bidding of the Jesuit order because of Jesuit infiltration into their organizations. They do whatever is necessary to destroy the constitutional liberty in America and to bring the Pope to world domination. As we look back over the 20th century, we see just how successful the Jesuits have been. They have continued to squander the wealth of America and continually attack its great Constitution and the civil liberties Americans enjoy. Daily, the power of the Pope in Vatican City increases. One day, they will achieve total power again. Bill Hughes, The Secret Terrorists, page 16 and 17. Seldom is it mentioned that the Rothschilds, along with their Western bankers and industrialists, financed the rise of Hitler as a bulwark against the Soviets. The ultra-right wing falsely describes the Rothschilds as Jewish bankers, when in fact the Rothschilds are interwoven with the Catholic Church and jointly with the traditional mafia and the American CIA and interlocked with the Vatican Bank, which was pro-Nazi. Sherman H. Skolnick. Source www.beyondweird.com. Article title The Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. The Jesuits were driven to cooperate with the other two international brotherhoods, the Freemasons and the Jews, the Rothschilds Illuminati, in the destruction of the Spanish Empire. Salvador de Madariaga, Spanish statesman, the Jesuits, 1820. During the suppression of the Jesuit order from 1773 to 1814 by Pope Clement XIV, General Ritchie, 18th Superior General Black Pope of the Society of Jesus, 1758 to 1775, created the Order of the Illuminati with his soldier Adam Weishaupt, uniting the House of Rothschild with the Society of Jesus. G.B. Niccolini, History of the Jesuits, Their Origin, Progress, Doctrines, and Designs. London, Henry G. Bond, 1899, pages 356 and 357. Jesuit Adam Weishaupt, 1748 to 1811, founder of the Illuminati, 1776. Born in Ingolstadt, Germany, in the heart of Roman Catholic Bavaria, from which originated the Jesuit Order's 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. Adam Weishaupt, a white German Gentile, was educated by the Jesuits. In 1775, he became a notorious professor of the Vatican's murderous canon law, including the evil Counter-Reformation Council of Trent. Since Pope Clement XIV's Bull of Extinction was not enforced in Lutheran Germany, the Jesuit order flourished at its University of Ingolstadt, out of which Adam Weishaupt established the Illuminati in 1776 and joined the Grand Orient Masonic Lodge in 1777. Adam Weishaupt united the magnificent financial empire of the Kabbalistic Masonic Jewish House of Rothschild, the guardians of the Vatican Treasury, with the opulence of the international and secret anti-Jewish race, primarily white Gentile Society of Jesus. Nestor H. Webster, Secret Societies and Subversive Movements, South Pasadena, California, Emissary Publications, 1988, originally published in 1924. Adam Weishaupt and his fellow Jesuits cut off the income to the Vatican by launching and leading the French Revolution, and by directing Napoleon's conquest of Catholic Europe, and by the revolt against the Catholic Church, led by such priests as Father Hidalgo in Mexico and Latin America, and by eventually having Napoleon throw Pope Pius VII in jail at Avignon until he agreed, as the price for his release, to re-establish the Jesuit order. This Jesuit war on the Vatican was terminated by the Congress of Vienna and by the secret 1822 Treaty of Verona. Ever since, the Rothschilds have been fiscal agents of the Vatican. Emanuel M. Josephson, Jewish-American physician and historian. The Federal Reserve Conspiracy at Rockefellers, 1968. You'll also find ex-British intelligence officer Dr. John Coleman expose how the Rothschilds and even the Rockefellers' wealth simply doesn't come close to some of the members of the Committee of 300, which is controlled by the Order of the Garter, the Pilgrim Society, and all the inner corps of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. The Jews were bought into positions of power within banking back in 1066 by the Norman Anglo-Saxon monarchs. For this they accepted being controlled. Remember that the law of banking is known as International Maritime Admiralty Law. This maritime law was based on Vatican canon law. All the war banks, known as central banks, get controlled from the Sovereign Military Order of Malta-controlled Switzerland. The Federal Reserve pays the Bank of England, which finally ends up in the Swiss Bank of International Settlements. All you need to do is to study the Sovereign Military Order of Malta and its members, and then look at the who's who in banking. Craig Oxley. Source www.godlikeproductions.com. www.davidicke.com. Suspicious decorations and obedience. In the early 19th century, the Pope approached the Rothschilds to borrow money. The Rothschilds were very friendly with the Pope, causing one journalist to sarcastically say, "Rothschild has kissed the hand of the Pope." Order has at last been re-established. Source: Derek Wilson, Rothschild, The Wealth and Power of a Dynasty, page 101. www.biblebelievers.org.au. Karl Mayr, Kalman Rothschild, 1788 to 1855, Österreich. He even granted Pope Gregory XV cash injections. and was received on January the 10th, 1832 in audience. The kiss on the hand allowed, and the Order of St. George awarded. Source, http://www.godlikeproductions.com. The Jesuit-controlled Sovereign Military Order of Malta has a permanent observer status at the United Nations. Who created the Council on Foreign Relations, which created the United Nations? The Jesuits control the Council on Foreign Relations. The Rothschilds are simply court Jews for the papacy, and always will be, unless they play up. Then the papacy will simply annihilate them by any means necessary. If you look at what's going on in this world properly, you can see that the Roman Catholic Church quite clearly has control. The Rothschilds have been under the Black Pope's thumb since the 18th century. Be careful of the many diversionists out there playing with your mind. The Jesuits always control both sides. When you put money in the bank, does the bank own that money, or can you remove it and place it in another bank or under your mattress? Yes, if there's a crash, you can lose your money. But the Jesuit will never lose his money. Remember, the whole banking system is fully controlled by the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, and has been for eons. Switzerland is their banking headquarters, closely followed by the city of New York, and Dubai. The Rothschilds are subordinate to the Jesuits and the Sovereign Military Order of Malta commanders, period. You need to understand how the Jews were granted the positions of power within the Sovereign Military Order of Malta banking. Look to 1066 and the agreement with them being ruled by the Norman Anglo-Saxon monarchs. These Jews have their uses to the Jesuit. The Jesuit isn't stupid. He will utilize what he can to make his power cemented and stronger. The fourth vow. Jesuits are the most organized of any order known, and the most powerful. What do you hear about daily? Rothschild, Rothschild, Rothschild. What don't you hear about daily? You don't hear much about the Jesuits and the Superior General Black Pope. For that matter, you never hear about the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, as they are kept quiet in the info wars. The Council on Foreign Relations was created by the Sovereign Military Order of Malta back in 1921, after their creation of the Royal Institute of International Affairs in 1919. Both of these control the 1868 corporation known as the United States. Both are arms of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, via their inner cores within the city known as the Pilgrim Society, the Order of the Garter, and the Committee of 300. The Council on Foreign Relations created the United Nations. Now, notice how the Sovereign Military Order of Malta have permanent observer status within the United Nations. Look to the likes of New York Jesuit Joseph O'Hare, who is a CFR. It is correct. There is many labor Masonic Zionists within the CFR, but remember also they are Masonic, which itself means subordinate to the Jesuit Superior General Black Pope, who controls all of Freemasonry. Again, thanks to Adam Weishaupt. If you look at the Georgetown Law Journal, volume 71, pages 1179 to 1200, you will see that it is stated, the Norman and Anglo-Saxon kings own the Jews. It states the Jews are controlled by Great Britain. It also states the Talmud is now the law of the land as of 1066, and it is enforced by the popes and the kings. This is what you would call the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC. It is accurate to presume as fact, that Australia, New Zealand, and Canada are not independent sovereign countries. However, these nations are not owned and run by the UK. They are owned and run by the House of Windsor Crown Temple Syndicate within the City of London Corporation. The head signatory of the Crown Temple Syndicate is Elizabeth Windsor, Queen Elizabeth II of England. It should not be forgotten that the most powerful financial syndicate in the Western world is that of the European Rothschilds. The Rothschilds, because of their power base inside the City of London Corporation, have a controlling membership of the London Crown Temple Syndicate, and they also have executive control of the Vatican and the Mafia through the P2 Masonic Lodge in Italy. The financial affairs of the new United Kingdom coalition government in London are also Rothschild-controlled. Queen Elizabeth II fronts for the Rothschilds. She is the largest landowner on earth. She is the head of state for the United Kingdom and of 31 other states and territories, and is the legal owner of 6,600 million acres of land, 1/6 of the world's land surface. A conservative estimate of the value of the Crown Temple Syndicate's land holding under the Queen's signature is $17.6 trillion. Source, http://www henrymacau.com. One of the significant sources of funds for the cabal is the healthcare industry, which registered a whopping $3.09 trillion in 2014 and is projected to soar to $3.57 trillion in 2017 in the U.S. alone. We believe that this is just a conservative figure. Source: https://geopolitics.co. Article title: The Rothschilds are Jesuits. Also, www.plunkettresearch.com. Article title: Healthcare Business Trends Analysis. The Pope owns American Express, the biggest Freemason. Excerpts from Cisco Wheeler and Billy Graham, tinyurl.com/3 dead words. If this is news to you, then it just goes to show that you are sleeping with your shoes on. So let's learn about the Pope by applying the time-tested wisdom of tell me who your friends are, and I will know exactly who you are. Source: http://beforeitsnews.com. Article titled: The Three City-States That Control the Whole World. Well, from what we have learned earlier, we know the current Black Pope is a Jesuit. His puppet is the White Pope, who is also a Jesuit. We also know the White Pope is the front man for the Vatican, one of the three city-states that control the whole world. Washington, D.C. and the City of London are the other two, which are also run by the Jesuits. So we have a good idea of who the Pope's friends are. The Vatican, approximately 1,000 people. The City of London, approximately 11,000 people. And Washington, D.C., population approximately 700,000 people. Like I said earlier, don't kid yourselves, people. The suffering of many is in but the hands of a few. These three city-states are run like a tyrannical dictatorship, military operation, and major corporation all rolled into one. The bottom line is all that matters to them on their way to their goal of global domination and global control. Global domination and control is only a tool they are using in order to achieve their true agenda, their true endgame. In the end, the world will see it is souls and not money or earthly things, which is their true goal. They need control over the earth and its people in order to get control over the people's souls. It is only in this way that they can truly serve their true master, which is Lucifer, Satan, the devil. Lucifer is not interested in heavenly or earthly things. As he knows, heaven and earth will pass away. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass. Matthew 24:35. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth was gone, and the sea is now no more. Revelation 21:1. Lucifer is only interested in one thing, one eternal thing, and that is people's souls. The rest of our mortal life is just smoke and mirrors. Our flesh and blood will pass away, but our souls will live forever. The only thing that matters, people, is our souls. Don't ever forget that, because the devil will promise us anything and distract us with everything, just to get our soul in the end. The devil will use every manner of deceit to keep us from the thought of saving our own soul, because the devil wants our soul to be his slave burning in hell under his oppression forever and ever. We will all soon come to see that this is the indelible truth behind the Jesuit New World Order endgame. Always remember, it is under the guise of good that evil is done. Remember what Edmund Burke said? The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That includes good women, too. All I can say is wake up, people. You better watch out for these evil people and the influence they peddle. You better watch out, therefore, praying at all times that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that are to come, and to stand before the Son of Man. Luke 21:36. Never neglect your own soul, and be wary of others, whose souls are in peril too. Warn as many people as you can about the value of their souls. Warn them of how precious they are in the eyes of God. Also warn people of how the devil is stalking our souls. And you should also know that we will be persecuted for it. And you shall be betrayed by your parents and brethren and kinsmen and friends. And some of you they will put to death. Luke 21:16. They will believe they are betraying you and putting you to death in the service of God. They will put you out of the synagogues. Yeah, the hour comes that whosoever kills you will think that he does a service for God. John 16:2. Well, I hate to give you the good news, people, but the hour is already here. Just take a good look around for yourself. And take a good look around at the world today. Everywhere you look, on every continent, people are being persecuted, tortured, and killed for their religious beliefs. People are being murdered all over the world in the name of God and for their religion. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, or of what religious faith you are. Somewhere in the world today, your religious faith is being persecuted by some other religious faith. All these people, brainwashed into fighting in these religious wars, all believe they are killing their religious enemies in the name of God, fulfilling the prophecy set out in John 16:2. I believe all these religious wars are being fomented by the Jesuits and their secret synagogue of Satan cabal to eventually push and pull all religions under one roof. At the head of the satanic cabal is the Vatican City.
The Pope in America, a rousing welcome for the man who's been called the rock star Pope. Rock star Pope Francis begins a historic visit.
The Pope, the two leaders will speak to the world, then hold a one-on-one meeting with only translators in the room, all before Pope Francis addresses Congress Thursday with Biden in attendance. Even though the president and the Pope are allies on issues ranging from climate change to income inequality to Cuba, even the Iran nuclear deal, the White House refuses to reveal what the two men will discuss. The White House refuses to reveal what the two men will discuss.
And I believe the excitement around your visit, Holy Father, must be attributed not only to your role as Pope.
30 seconds left. Anything else?
Yes, I would like to just end with this note. As far as all the things that have happened while the Pope has been visiting here, the thing that bothered me the most is when he said Christ failed on the cross. And I did a report earlier in the day. People can go and look at where I reference certain scriptures, but Christ didn't fail on the cross. He knew he was going to die on the cross, and he said, I'm giving myself willingly. So I was very disturbed to hear something like that.
He said that? I didn't know that. That was Christ's ultimate triumph.
Yeah, and he said he failed on the cross. There's an ABC News. I'm sure it's on multiple
Sounds like
other
something
news
the devil
outlets as well.
would say, Jakari. I think.
And if at times our efforts and works seem to fail and not produce fruit, we need to remember that we are followers of Jesus Christ. And his life, humanly speaking, ended in failure. The failure of the cross.
Flammas eius, Lucifer matutinus inveniat. Ille in quam Lucifer qui nescito casum, Christus filius tuus, qui regressus ab inferis, humano generis serenus iluxit, et tecum vivit et regnat in saecula saeculorum.
Words from Cardinal Timothy Dolan, but before that, you can see the Pope greeting members of the religious faiths one by one. And as he entered the hall as well, greeting many who were there to see him. This is an important.
Papa Francesco, on behalf of this very distinguished group, representatives of the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Sikh, Native American, Jewish, Islamic, and Christian communities of New York City.
Yes.
You say to them,
Yeah.
look, I have to have the Sabbath
Yes.
off,
Yes.
which, may I just confess that I learned in my first meeting with Devon, all these years I thought the Sabbath was Sunday.
Yeah.
I've been going to church. We say worship on the Sabbath in the Baptist church, and you corrected me. You said, no, Sunday is the first day of the week. Sabbath is Friday sundown to Saturday sundown.
That's right. That's
I
right.
stand corrected.
Americans work too much.
Maybe, but they should certainly be able to choose their own days off. The idea that somehow a bunch of guys in a state capital somewhere know what's best for us in terms of, how many days off we take and when we take them.
Everyone listen to the Pope speak on the importance of keeping Sunday as the Sabbath.
We are called to reflect more deeply on the mystery of creation, and therefore of our own life. We are called to rest.
Especially those in situations of greater vulnerability or risk. Legislative activity is always based to take care of the people. To this you have been invited, called, accompanied by those who elect you. Yours is a work which makes me reflect in two ways on the figure of Moses. On the one hand, the patriarch and lawgiver of the people of Israel symbolizes the need of people to keep alive their sense of unity by means of just legislation.
Vatican City incites both sides of every religious war. The City of London finances both sides of every war, and Washington, D.C. arms both sides of every war. All three of these city-states are under the rule of the Black Pope and the Jesuits. When the Jesuits succeed in pushing and pulling all religions under one roof, the Vatican's roof and rule, the Jesuits, under the guise of religious harmony, will force all people of all religions to worship one God, one false God, the Antichrist. You will either have to accept the mark of the beast and worship the beast, or you will be put to death. Again, in the name of God. And if you do accept the mark of the beast and worship the beast, guess what? There goes your soul into the eternal fires of hell for all eternity. This is the Jesuit synagogue of Satan's cabal, true endgame. They want our souls to burn in hell for all eternity. They want to serve their master Satan, and they want to serve up our souls to Lucifer. Like I said, it is under the guise of good that evil is done. Watch out and pray that you are not taken by these evil people. Why do you think they want to rob us of our privacy by RFID chipping everybody and everything? Why do you think they're constantly tracking us? Why do you think they are constantly improving their tracking capabilities? They are doing this so when the time comes, they can track us down with the push of a button and with the stroke of a key persecute and destroy us in our lives, if we decide not to worship the beast. They want to make our lives a living hell. Don't think for a minute there is any difference to the Jesuits between the Russians and the Americans, the Jews and the Muslims, the Sunni and the Shiites, the Catholics and the Protestants, the Hindi and the Buddhists. And don't think for a minute there is any difference between the Republican and the Democrat, the liberal and the conservative, or the right, left, and alternative party in any democracy or dictatorship. They are all being used by the same Jesuits in their secret synagogue of Satan cabal. They all have souls that the Jesuits want to see burning in hell. The following are some excerpts from some clips showing just how far-reaching the Jesuits and their synagogue of Satan cabal is.
The political system of America has been under direct control of the Lunacorp for some time. It was actually a relatively easy acquisition, and has been even easier to manage. Politicians know of our unspoken agreement, and will do anything to stay in power.
A two-party system benefits the Lunacorp in that it reduces all issues to a black and white debate. Through media, we can play side against side, using each where necessary to support our goals. Due to a diminishing faith in the system among the public, Illumicorp has designed a rogue candidate program to provide a voice for the dispossessed. This disperses the impetus for dissent among those who do not feel represented by our candidates and builds a database of potential dissidents.
I want to tell the world community that while we will always put America's interests first, we will deal fairly with everyone, all people and all other nations. We will seek common ground, not hostility, partnership, not conflict. And
the vision and future planning of the United States and the restructuring of the globe into a new world order is not limited to any particular US president, since globalism is a goal that may span 25 years plus. The maximum two-term limit of a US president is about 8 years. This is the reason why there are men in the shadows who steer national and foreign policy in a certain direction. The globalists work through groups such as the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, and the Vatican, which has insinuated itself as the New World Order religion, but encompassing all religion through interfaith. These groups and organisations have built a framework that US presidents must work within, or risk being assassinated. The chilling infiltration of both American and European institutions is widespread. The Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, Knights Columbus, Freemasonry and Skull and Bones, which are secretly subservient to the Vatican and controlled by the Jesuit order. This is why you see George Bush making the Skull and Bones sign while receiving communion. One can also discern the level of papal involvement by the behaviour of John Kerry. Donald Trump, like his predecessors, must work within the system, including working towards globalist ambitions such as the Club of Rome's plan to divide the world into 10 manageable regions with the Pope as the supreme ruler. We only have to be reminded of what happened to JFK, who rebuffed globalists, intelligence agencies, secret societies, and the Roman Catholic Church, even though he was a Catholic. JFK did many things contrary to the objectives of the deep state and the Vatican. He wanted to de-escalate involvement in Vietnam, dismantle the Federal Reserve, stated he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces, and to his detriment made a speech that greatly displeased the Vatican about the subject of separation between church and state. JFK was essentially a New World Order nonconformist who had to be eliminated.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
The event surrounding the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was another event that has been whitewashed by historians and academics. The irrefutable connection to the Jesuit order at the Vatican has been buried under a mountain of frivolous information. Statements from Lincoln himself have been omitted that tell of his anxiety towards an unseen battle with the Pope. Charles Quinniqui, a close friend of President Lincoln, was a disillusioned Catholic priest who had left the Catholic Church and become a Presbyterian minister. He confirmed that the Vatican was behind the Confederate cause, the death of President Lincoln, and that Lincoln's assassins were faithful Roman Catholics ultimately serving Pope Pius IX. The Vatican assassin was John Wilkes Booth, aided and abetted by other staunch Catholics. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, George Asteros, David Herold and John Surratt, who were coached by a Jesuit priest. At the time of the trial and hanging, the US government decided to hide the Vatican conspiracy from the public, in case of a public backlash against Catholics from an overwhelming Protestant majority. A psychologist stated in TheAtlantic.com that Donald Trump has personality traits of narcissism, disagreeableness, and grandiosity. These personality traits seem undesirable. In many respects, it is a safeguard from the tyranny of the establishment and the men in the shadows. If you look at those removed from power, like Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, as well as leaders whom the US wants to remove, like Assad and Putin, they all have one thing in common. They are independent thinkers, not willing to be a sock puppet for globalists, unlike Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump would be more likely to do things his own way rather than heed the counsel of advisors of think tank groups and the Jesuit order. Obama was surrounded by Jesuit-trained advisors because he, like Bush, Clinton, and so many other presidents, are not the real power behind the political throne. However, Trump, like Kennedy, is reliant on the Secret Service to protect him, aircraft mechanics to make sure his plane does not crash, and master chefs to make sure his food is not tainted. Trump will have to make concessions or risk being assassinated. Roman Catholic Mexicans are illegally crossing the US-Mexican border, neutralizing the mainly Protestant nation of the US. This is the reason Pope Francis was so upset by Trump's statement about erecting a border wall between the United States and Mexico, as more Catholics in the United States would give the Pope even greater political clout.
Thank God he said I was a politician, because Aristotle defined the human person as animal politicus. So at least I'm a human person. As to whether I'm a pawn, well, maybe. I don't know. I'll leave that up to your judgment and that of the people. And then, a person who thinks only about building walls, wherever they may be located, and not building bridges, is not a Christian. This is not in the gospel. As far as what you said about whether I would advise to vote or not vote, I am not going to get involved in that. I say only that this man is not a Christian if he has said things like that.
Just when I thought I'd seen it all, it happened. Since last year, when the Pope started calling for us to open our borders up and started saying that we were racist and evil for not doing it, I pointed out that even the New York Times admits Mexico has one of the strictest southern borders with Guatemala in the world, and upwards of a year in prison, forced labor, if they catch you trying to sneak in. So I said, why do we have to be wide open? And then once people get here, put them on welfare and make them collectivist Bernie Sanders voters. And then when I traveled to Rome last year and actually saw the 200-foot plus walls, on average over 90 feet, it blew me away around Vatican City, which they say themselves in the tours is the oldest sovereign nation, tax exempt, above the law in the world.
Though immigration sometimes carries an economical factor, the globalist agenda is to obliterate any sense of national identity so that the Club of Rome can usher in her 10-region agenda. This is the precursor to the New World Order that will give absolute power to the Pope.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, why is it happening? I mean, if you research this conspiracy for not very long, you realize that it is like a room of dominoes in a line, and you push one domino down and that creates the next domino to fall. So we've had this situation in the Middle East where we've had all this bombing and destruction and chaos and catastrophe externally created by the United States, NATO, Britain. And this has forced large numbers of people to leave. And this wave into Europe has of genuine people who deserve our help because of the situation that the West has put them in, has been joined by vast numbers of other people who are not refugees but are seeking to get into Europe. And it's being allowed to happen for this reason. And it's been long planned for this reason. They want a world government, a world central bank, world army, and world currency, etc. And under the world government, they want these super states. They want the European Union, of course, the American Union, the Pacific Union, all these super states under the world government. And these super states are designed not to be countries any longer, but to be broken up into regions, subordinate regions that are easy to control. You've talked about this in relation to the United States and North America, and it's planned for the world. Now, the biggest resistance to the breakup and ending of sovereignty is a sense of national identity.
The purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government. What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously. There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goals of the Roman Catholic institution. Two doctrines define this very well. One is called the doctrine of the apostolic succession, and that is dealing with the papacy. And the other is the doctrine, the temporal power, and that is dealing with world government.
The founders of the CIA, which replaced the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, were Alan Dulles, a Knight of Malta, Harry Truman, a Freemason, and William J. Donovan, who was also a Knight of Malta. Every director of the CIA has had some connection to the Jesuit order, through either a secret society, a Jesuit priest, or a Jesuit education. The CIA vet potential US presidents, often grooming candidates or sabotaging them, like the Trump hot mic incident. Here it was apparent that Billy Bush egged Trump on while recording him. Billy Bush is a member of the Bush dynasty. The Bush family are deeply involved with the CIA, the Vatican, and Skull and Bones, a secret society that makes their initiates carry out immoral acts or confess sordid details of their lives. These initiates can then be controlled or blackmailed if they start to think independently outside the order. The Parliament of the United Kingdom is controlled in a similar way. Both the House of Lords and the House of Commons are mostly controlled by MI5 or MI6 through blackmailing or destroying individuals with recordings, such as videotapes of politicians engaging in bad behaviour, such as soliciting prostitutes and even pedophilia parties. That is the secret of how politicians are controlled or destroyed by intelligence agencies. Since 9/11, the only director of the CIA who has not been Jesuit trained was Michael Morrell, who is a member of Skull and Bones, a society controlled by the Jesuit order. James Clapper, staunch Roman Catholic, is Director of National Intelligence, a position that makes him an advisor to the President and generally an overseer of all intelligence agencies. The Vatican now controls intelligence agencies, which gives the Jesuits a carte blanche to carry out operations not only in secret, but at the expense of the everyday American taxpayer.
An astonishing admission by the Roman Catholic Church. They run the CIA. Did you know the CIA is also dubbed Catholic Intelligence Agency? Catholics in Action. Is the CIA truly American? For decades, Jesuit affiliates of the Roman Catholic Church have directed the CIA. Leon Panetta and John Brennan, the current director, are Jesuit trained. Are Jesuits today the same as Jesuits of the past? Are you familiar with the Jesuit oath? its devious plans to control the wealth of the nations, enslave the masses, and depopulate the world. Pope Francis is a Jesuit. Should we be alarmed that the institution the Pope heads also controls the CIA? The CIA's mission is to identify and destroy terrorists and fundamentalists. Pope Francis likewise, and defines them as those who believe in absolute truth, end-time prophecies of Daniel and the Revelation, refuse to yield their liberty of conscience, and give up constitutional rights. The insidious agenda of the Jesuits will soon be realized, as Pope Francis has been hailed Lord of the world and Savior of the earth.
Catholic Herald, which is a news publication for the Roman Catholic Church, gives us a new and interesting way to look at the CIA, or the Central Intelligence Agency. By professing right in the very front page of this Catholic Herald News, it states that the Catholic Church thrives in the CIA. The headlines read, "Why Catholics Thrive in the CIA." The agency has been dubbed, and I quote, "Catholics in action," end quote, because the faithful have occupied so many senior positions. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a plain easy giveaway, and it should not take a rocket scientist or anyone with great qualifications to understand that the Roman Jesuits, or should I say the Vatican, is the one that runs the Central Intelligence Agency. Make some very interesting notes here. Make note that the CIA thrives in the United States of America. It has the seal of the United States and the symbol of the United States right on it. The eagle is right there. Secondly, make note, the Jesuit order thrives primarily at the Vatican. However, what you need to understand is that the Jesuit order is a secret police for the Vatican, and what they have done is they have successfully infiltrated every other governmental structure in the world today. But they will disguise themselves as Roman Catholics, and that is because they are Roman Catholics. Just as you have Joe Biden, he is the first Roman Catholic Vice President of the United States of America. While he is the very first Vice President who is a Roman Catholic, we also have the very first Jesuit Roman Catholic leader, the Pope, Pope Francis. In case you missed it, let me go back and repeat myself again so you will understand exactly what I'm telling you. These Jesuits, though they infiltrate other governmental structures, they simply will never tell you that they are Jesuits, but they will tell you that they are simply Roman Catholics. Their allegiance belongs to the Pope. These so-called Roman Catholics, they are Jesuits, especially the ones who are in political structures or in judicial positions of power. The United States of America is run by Jesuits. They used the order of the Masons as scapegoats. The majority of people, the minute they hear the words Freemason, they automatically think the most evil secret society. But when they hear Jesuits, they think, oh, Pope Francis is a Jesuit, he's a good person, he's a Roman Catholic. I think the Jesuits are connected to the Roman Catholics. They have hospitals and schools and many other good institutions, so they're not that bad. But that's how they operate. They operate in a very subtle way. The evidence for this is that we see a reflection between America and the Vatican. The United States Capitol is designed to resemble the Vatican. The obelisk in the United States of America also is a direct reflection of the obelisk of Rome and the Vatican. The symbols of sun worship within the Freemasons and within the Jesuit order, it's all the exact same. Going back to the CIA, when we look at the symbol of the CIA, the United States seal, what we also
attention placed on the NSA's mass surveillance of American citizens, it's easy to forget the other countries that are taking a page out of the agency's spy book. Just this past weekend, it was revealed that in 2008, Australia's surveillance agency shared information about the country's citizens with its most trusted intelligence partners. Perhaps the most concerning part of this recently leaked Snowden document was the discussion between these allies over whether or not to share the medical, legal, and religious information of Australian citizens. But this story is just a microcosm of the larger international spying cabal working together to peer into every nook and cranny of the world. So who exactly are these peeping partners? Well, they call themselves the Five Eyes, a partnership made up of intelligence agencies in 5 English-speaking countries: the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And just like the Eye of Sauron, eyes see all, which is an especially appropriate analogy since The Lord of the Rings was filmed in New Zealand. But I digress. You see, the Five Eyes Agreement has been around since the end of World War II, but it was so secret that the program wasn't even disclosed to the public until 2005. On the surface, this treaty is just a friendly agreement between allied nations that it's essential to stopping global terrorism. But thanks to the Snowden leaks, we now know just what an asinine agreement it's actually being used for: industrial espionage and circumventing those pesky laws that prohibit warrantless surveillance of a country's own citizens. In theory, these nations are not allowed to spy on each other's people, but we all know rules are meant to be broken. In 2007, the NSA analyzed and retained any British citizen's mobile phone number, email, and IP address swept up in its enormous dragnet. Another memo dated from 2005 shows that the NSA was working on a procedure to spy on the other 4 countries. And while one sentence in the memo states that the US and UK will not explicitly target each other, the very next sentence says governments reserve the right to spy on each other's citizens when it's in the best interest of each nation. Well, that's not open to interpretation at all. Look, I think it's clear at this point that the myth of the American empire exporting freedom and democracy really means exporting surveillance and subjugation. Guys, there's a lot going on in the world, a lot that you might disagree with. But as much as we protest and complain to our elected representatives, it doesn't seem to shape the actual legislation put into action. Foreign policy is supposed to be drafted between the president and Congress, but that would be too easy, it'd be too democratic. So instead, legislation is now outsourced. Policy prescriptions are made by think tanks and NGOs like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Atlantic Council, and the Trilateral Commission. The idea of having academics researching world issues, pairing with world journalists to help keep our elected officials informed sounds like a good idea, right? Sure. But what happens when the policy recommendations are being made by the councils and think tanks whose board members are the CEOs of some of the biggest corporations in the world? Is it a conflict of interest that many of these councils are run by executives from almost every major industry, from food to media, and most shockingly, national defense? Let's take a look at just some of the few. Council on Foreign Relations. Their mission statement is in part sponsoring independent task forces that produce reports with both findings and policy prescriptions on the most important foreign policy topics. The question I ask is, what sort of policy prescriptions can we expect from a board of directors that includes Madeleine Albright and Colin Powell, both of whom served as U.S. Secretary of State, and Tom Brokaw and Fareed Zakaria, both 2 well-known establishment journalists? So, these folks aren't even in government anymore, yet they sit on the board of one of the most influential think tanks in the world. Now, if you doubt the CFR's influence, just take a listen of a clip of Hillary Clinton's first visit as Secretary of State to the CFR headquarters right here in Washington, D.C.
We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
What we should be doing and how we should think about the future? Gee, Hillary, you're really letting the cat out of the bag there. Now, you may be wondering why you don't hear about these groups' influence from the corporate media. As I mentioned before, extremely powerful and influential media moguls sit on these boards. They are part of the establishment, and the CFR is only one of these groups. What about the Atlantic Council? According to the Atlantic Council's website, part of their focus is on drafting roadmaps for U.S. policy toward the Balkans, Cuba, Iraq, Iran, and Libya. Now, this is especially interesting because membership of the Atlantic Council includes some of the top defense corporations in the country: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon. So why are the top defense corporations in the world advising our lawmakers on foreign policy? As we know, the revolving door between government and corporations never stops spinning.
The Bilderberg Group can be summed up in their goals and aspirations by looking at the founders. Joseph Ratzinger, who once studied to be a Catholic priest in a Jesuit seminary, was concerned about the anti-Americanism in Western Europe. He approached Prince Berhard of the Netherlands, who then in turn contacted Paul van Zeeland of the Catholic Party of Belgium. Prince Berhard contacted Walter Bedell Smith, director of the CIA, and facilitated guest lists through Eisenhower's advisor Charles Douglas Jackson, who was an expert in psychological warfare and director of the defunct OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, the forerunner of the CIA. So the Bilderberg Group founders consisted of royalty, intelligence service directors, a member of the Roman Catholic political party, and the influences of the Jesuit order Novitiate, Joseph Ratzinger. Enough said.
Well, secretive and elite. The Bilderberg Group unites the world's most powerful people behind closed doors. It's been happening for decades. Some even believe it's a venue where the world's most rich and powerful conspire to carve out a new world order. RT correspondent Abby Martin was in Chantilly, Virginia today to let us know what's happening outside of the Bilderberg Conference and joins us now to tell us all about it. Abby, nice to see you. So we have a lot of powerful people all in one room. Happens all the time. So what's all the fuss about?
Yeah, egregious violation of federal law. There's an act called the Logan Act, which says that you cannot meet with foreign diplomats without congressional oversight. And I think that that's really the main key here is people are like, hold on, why are there 130 of the most powerful world players in banking, mining, oil, food, media, defense, and politics? Why are they all getting together and meeting in secrecy behind closed doors without any congressional oversight or really any awareness of what it is they're talking about?
Donald Trump was taught and educated by Jesuits. He was educated by a Jesuit in a Jesuit school. And guess what? His running mate, also titled as the future Vice President of the United States of America, Michael Pence. He is a Catholic. And if anything you need to know about the Catholics are these. The Catholics which run for these political positions, who go into high positions of authority, these are no ordinary Catholics. No, these are the Jesuits that control the world. In a nutshell, Mike Pence, he is in fact actually more powerful than Obama himself. But that's not all. Hillary Clinton's running mate is also a Jesuit, and he publicly mentioned this. Now here are where things get more interesting. You see, Joe Biden is a Jesuit who disguises that title of Jesuit under his faith of Catholicism, but his loyalty and allegiance belongs to the Pope. That's number one. He is the vice president of Barack Hussein Obama. So a Jesuit is Obama's vice president of choice. Now, Hillary Clinton, she has picked a vice president who is a Jesuit. Now, interestingly enough, when we go to the Republican side and we look at Donald J. Trump, Donald Trump, he was taught by a Jesuit, educated in a Jesuit school, and guess what? Just like Barack Obama, Donald Trump picked a Jesuit to be his running mate, who also, just as Joe Biden has, he disguises the title of Jesuit under his faith of Catholicism. Yet, his loyalty and allegiance belongs to who? To the papacy. Can you see what I have just illustrated to you? These people are connected. All roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to Rome. So you may think that one of these people are on your side and the other one is not on your side. But it doesn't change the fact that you are participating in their little political game.
If you remember, in the preface of this V-book I said, I was born and baptized a Catholic. I will die a Catholic. However, by reading on, you will later discover I don't believe too much in religion. Now, you see why I don't believe too much in religion. Every religion I have discovered are all the same behind the scenes. They hide behind the cloak of the godliness of their religion, but behind the scenes they all have their own occult-like, corrupt agendas, only to serve themselves, not God. I cannot in any good conscience say I believe in any religion. All religions offer some good to the people, but the evil that goes on behind the scenes is their true purpose. The atrocities committed by every religion in the name of God is a sin. The Catholic religion is no different. The Jesuits are the puppet masters behind the scenes of the so-called Catholic religion. The Jesuits surround themselves with evil people.
This is the reason why there are men in the shadows who steer national and foreign policy in a certain direction. The globalists work through groups such as the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, and the Vatican, which has insinuated itself as the New World Order religion, but encompassing all religion through interfaith. These groups and organisations have built a framework that US presidents must work within, or risk being assassinated. The chilling infiltration of both American and European institutions is widespread. The Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, Knights Columbus, Freemasonry and Skull and Bones, which are secretly subservient to the Vatican and controlled by the Jesuit order. This is why you see George Bush making the Skull and Bones sign while receiving communion. One can also discern the level of papal involvement by the behaviour of John Kerry.
The Jesuits carry out evil agendas.
As the Club of Rome's plan to divide the world into 10 manageable regions, with the Pope as the supreme ruler. We only have to be reminded of what happened to JFK, who rebuffed globalists, intelligence agencies, secret societies, and the Roman Catholic Church, even though he was a Catholic. JFK did many things contrary to the objectives of the deep state and the Vatican. Though immigration sometimes carries an economical factor, the globalist agenda is to obliterate any sense of national identity, so that the Club of Rome can usher in her 10-region agenda. This is the precursor to the New World Order that will give absolute power to the Pope.
And the Jesuits invoke evil spirits.
Flammas eius, Lucifer matutinus inveniat. Ide inquam Lucifer qui nescito casum.
To understand this mortal world, we must first have to understand the spiritual world that goes on around us every single day of our lives. There is much more to life than meets the eye. There is more going on that is unseen than is seen, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12. Teach these things to as many others as you can, for they have come to pass in our lifetime. And know this too, the danger of saving other souls in peril is more than worth the price of our own persecution. Blessed are you who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they shall revile you and persecute you and speak all kinds of evil against you falsely, for my sake. Be glad and rejoice, for your reward is very great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets that were before you. Matthew 5:10-12. These types of evil people are always scheming. Since day one, they have been striving to be as almighty and as all-powerful as God himself. And they have endlessly been trying to deceive the masses. The elitists are on a mission. They are constantly working to be equal to God. Mission impossible, if you ask me. It will never happen for obvious reasons. Although they might be movers and shakers, the leaders and innovators are constantly looking for ways to deceive, rape, plunder, and pillage the earth, and eventually burn the masses. The elitists can never be as omnipotent as God. The lazy wannabes and the envious, undecided people of the masses are the opposite. They are followers, just like sheep being led to the slaughter. It is almost as if they have a huge sign painted on their forehead saying, pick me, just begging to be slaughtered. They are neither good nor wise sheep. They have lost or ignore their shepherd. They want to go their own way and do their own thing. If they can scam someone for something they want without paying for it or giving equal value as a trade for it, they will willingly rip off another person. They are not willing to work for what they want or need. They either think there is no God and there is no devil, or they think they are their own God. They think it is okay to kill, steal, lie, cheat, rob, rape, plunder, pillage, whoever they can and whatever they can. They think it's okay to be evil, it's okay to be immoral, and it's okay to do whatever they want, whenever they want, whether or not it is right or wrong. They are full of themselves. Unfortunately, today's millennials are more full of themselves than any other generation before them, and this will only get worse as time goes by. Fulfilling another Bible prophecy found in 2 Timothy, know this also, that in the last day shall come dangerous times. Men shall be lovers of themselves, covetous, haughty, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, wicked, without affection, without peace, slanderers, incontinent, unmerciful, without kindness, traitors, stubborn, puffed up, and lovers of pleasures more than of God, having an appearance indeed of godliness, but denying the power thereof. Now these avoid, for of these sort are they who creep into houses, and lead captive silly women laden with sins, who are led away with diverse desires, ever learning and never attaining to the knowledge of truth. 2 Timothy 3:1-7. These lovers of themselves are vain and conceited people. They are living Aleister Crowley's legacy and mantra off. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. They are full of themselves and the 7 deadly sins. The wise and the good sheep are willing to wait for God Almighty to come. They listen to the word of their shepherd and they follow him. They trust the good shepherd to keep them safe from the ravenous wolves. Go, behold, I send you as lambs among the wolves. Luke 10:3. Behold, I send you as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. Matthew 10:16. Do not open your heart to every man. Take counsel with a wise and conscientious man. Tobit 4:19. Keep yourself as a stranger here on earth, a pilgrim whom the affairs of the world do not concern you at all. In all things consider your end. Blessed is he who keeps the moment of death ever before his eyes, and prepares for it every day. He is truly wise who looks upon all earthly things as folly, that he may gain Christ. Philippians 3:8. Many die suddenly and unexpectedly, for in the unexpected hour the Son of God will come. Matthew 24:44. Dearly beloved, I beseech you to be as strangers and pilgrims. Refrain yourselves from carnal desires, which war against the soul. 1 Peter 2:11. Today's millennials are so full of themselves and hold a sense of entitlement to themselves as a God-given right. They are full of pride and haughtiness, envy and greed, lust and laziness, and full of desire. Some of the 7 deadly sins. What are the 7 deadly sins? The 7 deadly sins, as viewed by society and literature, are: Number 1, lust, to have an intense desire or need. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Matthew 5:28. Number 2, gluttony, excess in eating and drinking. For drunkards and gluttons become poor, and drowsiness clothes them in rags. Proverbs 23:21. Number 3, greed, excessive and reprehensible acquisitiveness. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality, so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, with a continual lust for more. Ephesians 4:19. Number 4, laziness, disinclined to activity or exertion, not energetic or vigorous. The way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. Proverbs 15:19. Number 5, wrath, a strong, vengeful anger or indignation. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Proverbs 15:1. Number 6, envy, painful or resentful awareness of an advantage enjoyed by another, joined with a desire to possess the same advantage. Therefore rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up into your salvation. 1 Peter 2:1-2. Number 7, pride, quality or state of being proud, inordinate self-esteem. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. Source, http://allaboutgod.com. Article title, What are the 7 Deadly Sins? Now that we have the viewpoints of society and literature, let's take a look at what God has to say about the 7 deadly sins in the Bible. What are the 7 detestable sins according to God, the Bible? There are 6 things the Lord hates. Yeah, 7 that are detestable to him. Number 1, haughty eyes, behaving in a superior, condescending, or arrogant way. Number 2, a lying tongue. Number 3, hands that shed innocent blood. Number 4, a heart that devises wicked schemes. Number 5, feet that are quick to rush into evil. Number 6, a false witness who pours out lies. And number 7, a man who stirs up dissension amongst his brothers. Proverbs 6:16-19. Source, http://allaboutgod.com. Article title, What are the 7 deadly sins? Satan is just sitting back laughing and waiting for all these people and their mortal bodies to die. On the day of judgment, their souls will be handed over to Satan by God, just like Jesus was handed over to the satanically possessed mob by Pilate. The only difference being Jesus was innocent. Evil people are guilty. After God condemns the guilty and hands them over to Satan for their iniquities, they will be his slaves to do with whatever he will for all eternity. God's final judgment is final. There is no changing it. Every condemned soul will never be set free from Satan's torturous grip and burning in the fires of hell. That's the deal between God and Satan. Satan's fate has already been sealed. God has already established the kingdom of hell and its boundaries. Satan will be the king in his kingdom. There is not much point to being a king or having a kingdom without subjects. That's why Satan so desperately wants our eternal soul. He needs slaves, subjects to torture and suffer with him. That's why the devil is endlessly roaming the earth, looking to deceive and possess all the people he can, to convince them that neither he nor God are real. For all of you who fall for this second attempt to deceive you, you will be subjects and slaves in the kingdom of hell. You might be asking yourself by now, what has all this got to do with why God created the devil? Trust me, we'll get to that. I thought it would be wise to first establish that there is a God. There is a Lucifer, and you do have a soul. There is a raging war being waged for your eternal soul every single day of your life. Finally, there is a day of judgment. I thought it would be equally wise to remind you, the hereafter is eternal. You can believe or not believe whatever it is you want to believe or not believe. That's your business. But I'm telling you right now, you do have a soul. You better learn to watch out for your soul, and you better learn to protect your soul, as by far our soul is the greatest gift that God has given every one of us. Our souls are immortal. Beware of your own immortality, and of the people who want to destroy it for you, lest they teach you to do all the abominations which they have done to their gods, and you should sin against the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 20:18. And in the end times, temptations and sufferings will be much more prolific, for there will rise up false Christs and false prophets, and they will show signs and wonders, to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. Mark 13:22. You must not listen to the words of that prophet or dreamer. The Lord your God is testing you to find out whether you love him with all your heart and with all your soul. Deuteronomy 13:13. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. Matthew 7:15. But be very careful to keep the commandments and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you. To love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to keep his commands, to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. Joshua 22:5. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Deuteronomy 6:5. If you pay attention to these laws and are careful to follow them, then the Lord your God will keep his covenant of love with you, as he swore to your ancestors. Deuteronomy 7:12. The war between God and Lucifer for our immortal soul is the one and only truth of this world. Everything else is a distraction from that truth. The truth is, both God and Lucifer want our eternal soul, and in the end, both God and Lucifer use spirits and mortals to get it. Mortals are influenced by mortals, and mortals are also influenced by spirits. Some mortals are keenly aware of the good and evil spirits that surround us at all times. We all know there are good and bad people out there in the world, but in the end, good will always triumph over evil, and I will prove it to you in simple English very soon. What else did the Jesuits control? What is the Jesuits' true end game? This question is for the non-believers and the doubters. So, do you believe you have a soul yet? If you still don't believe you have a soul and that there is a very heavy spiritual war being fought for your immortal soul every single day of your life, then I pray, Dear Lord, please help me to explain your truth in layman's terms, so that all may understand how precious their souls are in your sight, and how valuable their souls are to themselves. Help me to help them willingly seek you out and come to know you and love you. Help me to convert the non-believers and the skeptics into believers through the simple words and explanations you gave me to the tough questions I had. Help me to explain the difficult and hard-to-understand questions that others have about their lives and your existence in their lives. Please, Lord, help the non-believers to seek you and to find you. Please convert the non-believing heart to a believing one. Let the blind eye see and the deaf ear hear. Give strength to the weak and courage to the afraid. Give direction to the lost and guidance to the confused. Give decision to the undecided and resolve to the unresolved. Give fortitude to the faint and hope to the hopeless. Give peace to the anxious and answers to the curious. Please, Lord, give them the sight to see how precious and valuable their souls are, not only to you, Lord, but also to themselves. Please, Lord, give them the wisdom and the strength to save not only their own souls, but also the souls of their families, friends, and enemies alike. Lord, we have a monumental task before us. Please send us your Holy Spirit to help us to accomplish it. Thank you, Lord. End of Chapter 10, Part 2. All honor and glory to God. Coming next, Chapter 11. Questions and Religion. Until then, remember, the devil is stalking you, and God is calling you.